The wind howled across the open plains like a beast unchained, tearing through the darkness and clawing at the man on horseback. Rain lashed against his face, each drop a cold blade cutting into his skin. The storm had rolled in fast, too fast, and now the world was a blur of thunder, lightning, and the faint smell of gunpowder. Behind him, the echo of hooves. Two shadows chasing, their curses drowned by the storm's roar. Eli McGraw pressed his hand to the wound on his side, feeling the warmth of blood seeping through his coat. His horse, a chestnut named Boone, stumbled on the soaked earth but pushed on, driven by the man's desperate will. Eli's breath came ragged, every inhale a reminder that he was running out of time. The storm broke open the sky with another flash, white light revealing a ridge ahead, then a flicker far off in the distance. A light, a single, trembling flame through the darkness. Boone faltered again, his legs giving out beneath him. Eli hit the mud hard, the world spinning as his hand slipped on the slick ground. He tried to rise, but the pain drove him back down. Behind him, distant gunfire cracked through the rain. He dragged himself forward, one slow crawl at a time. Every inch felt like a mile. The light grew closer, a cabin, small and isolated, its window glowing like a beacon of mercy. The thought came to him like a prayer. Shelter, maybe salvation, maybe the end. When he reached the porch, he used the last of his strength to knock. The sound was faint, barely a whisper against the storm. He slumped against the doorframe, breathing shallow, his vision tunneling into darkness. Inside, a woman startled awake. Clara Hensley's hands trembled as she reached for the rifle resting against her table. The storm had been cruel that night, but the knock was worse. It was human, uncertain, desperate. She moved carefully, the hem of her faded dress brushing the wooden floor, the lamplight throwing long shadows across the room. "Who's there?" she called out. No answer, just the moan of wind through the cracks. She opened the door slowly, gun raised. The sight froze her. A man, drenched and bleeding, collapsed at her feet. His face pale, his beard rough with days of dust and blood. He whispered something she couldn't make out before his eyes rolled back, and he went still. For a moment, fear gripped her so hard she couldn't breathe. She'd sworn never to let another stranger cross her threshold again. Not after the night raiders took her husband and left her with nothing but ghosts. But she couldn't leave him out there. Not in this storm. With trembling hands, she dragged him inside, grunting with effort as the door slammed shut behind her. The wind screamed, then faded to a muffled hum against the walls. She lowered him near the fire, cutting open his coat to see the wound. A bullet grazed, deep but not fatal. "Fool," she muttered. "You'll die running from devils in weather like this." Eli's eyes fluttered open, barely focused. "Didn't mean to—" "Don't talk." She pressed a cloth to his wound, the blood soaking through fast. He flinched, muscles tensing, but she kept pressure steady. He tried to pull away, his hand catching hers. "Stop," he gasped. Her voice softened instinctively. "Don't stop," she whispered, steadying his arm as the cloth darkened. For a moment, their eyes met in the flicker of firelight, his full of pain and confusion, hers shadowed by something older, deeper. He thought she meant something else. The softness in her tone, the way her fingers lingered, it blurred in his pain-clouded mind. But all she meant was mercy. He winced, and she tightened the cloth. "You'll live," she said, though her voice trembled, "if you rest." She fetched water from the barrel, cleaned his wound, stitched it with shaking hands. The clock on the mantel ticked slow and heavy. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains, fading into distance. When she finally finished, she sat back, exhausted. The fire cracked, throwing orange light across his face. He was younger than she'd thought, maybe early 30s, but his eyes were old. Haunted eyes, the kind that had seen things men shouldn't. She studied the scars on his forearm, the dirt beneath his nails, the faint tattoo near his wrist, faded military ink. Confederate, maybe. A man from the war. Like her husband. Like the men who'd left this land cursed with grief. He stirred again, mumbling something in his sleep. Names, perhaps. Then silence. Clara wrapped a blanket around him, sitting back in her chair. The rain eased outside, the thunder slipping farther away. She watched him through the quiet, unsure if she'd saved a good man or brought danger into her home. Her gaze drifted to the rifle leaning against the wall, then back to him. In the glow of the fire, he looked peaceful now, almost innocent. But she knew better than to trust appearances. The West had taught her that. Still, as the wind whispered through the cracks and the storm finally died, she found herself whispering again, soft enough that only the fire could hear. "Don't stop breathing." Eli stirred, his brow softening as if he'd heard her. The night held its breath with them, caught between danger and something too fragile to name. Outside, unseen in the rain-soaked dark, two figures dismounted their horses and studied the cabin light from afar. One spat into the mud. "He ain't gone far," the man said, voice like gravel. "That's where he's holed up." Lightning flared again, lighting their faces, the same men who'd chased Eli through the storm. And as the last roll of thunder faded across the Wyoming hills, the woman inside closed her eyes for the first time that night, unaware that the storm wasn't over. It had only changed shape. The morning broke pale and cold over the plains, the storm spent but leaving its mark across every inch of land. The cabin sat quiet, a fragile refuge in a world washed raw by rain. A single curl of smoke rose from the chimney, catching the soft light of dawn as the wind tugged gently at the roof shingles. Inside, the scent of damp earth and wood smoke lingered. Eli stirred on the cot, blinking at the low ceiling beams and the faint crackle of the fire. His side ached, his shirt stuck to the bandage beneath. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was. The memories returned in fragments. The storm, the gunfire, the woman's voice. "Don't stop." The words drifted back like a dream he couldn't quite shake. He turned his head and saw her near the hearth, pouring coffee into a tin mug. She moved with quiet precision, as if she had long practiced the art of surviving in silence. The light caught her hair, a shade of gold dulled by hardship and the faint lines beneath her eyes. She looked younger than the sadness she carried. When she noticed him awake, she froze for a moment, then set the mug down on the table between them. "You're lucky," she said, not looking at him. "Another inch, that bullet would have had your ribs." Eli tried to sit up, grimacing at the pain. "You stitched me up. I did what I could. You were bleeding all over my floor." There was a sharpness in her tone that made him lower his gaze. He nodded once, quietly. "Thank you." She said nothing more. The only sound was the fire and the rain dripping from the eaves outside. After a long pause, Eli asked, "How long was I out?" "Half a night," she said. "You were muttering names. Sounded like ghosts." He looked away, jaw tight. "Maybe they are." Her eyes flicked up at him then, curious but wary. She took a sip of coffee, her hands trembling just slightly. "You got men chasing you. I saw their tracks this morning. 2 horses, maybe more." He nodded, staring at the flames. "I figured as much. You bring trouble to my door?" "I didn't mean to bring anything," he said quietly. "Just needed shelter." "You could have died on your horse somewhere else," she replied, then caught herself. The bitterness softened as quickly as it came. "I didn't mean that. I can't have more blood on this land." Eli watched her a moment longer. He could tell by the way she held her shoulders, the way her eyes darted toward the window, that she'd seen violence before and lost something she couldn't get back. "I won't stay long," he said. "Soon as I can ride, I'll be gone." "You can't ride," she said firmly. "Not yet." Her words hung in the air, surprising both of them. She sighed, then pushed the mug toward him. "Drink. You'll need strength." He accepted it with a nod. The warmth of the coffee seeped into his palms, anchoring him in a way he hadn't felt in years. He hadn't been cared for, not like this, since before the war. Clara turned back to her chores, sweeping near the door. Outside, the plains stretched endless and quiet, but the calm didn't comfort her. She kept glancing toward the window, half expecting to see riders cresting the hill. Eli followed her gaze. "You live out here alone?" "Since the spring," she said. "My husband built this place. Raiders came through one night. Took him, burned half the barn. I buried what was left." Eli's throat tightened. I'm sorry. She nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. Sorry, don't change the dirt. He studied her face then, the stillness in it, the restraint. She wasn't fragile. She was hardened like the land itself. And yet, there was a faint flicker of something else behind her eyes. Something like exhaustion or mercy. He reached for his hat on the chair, the motion too fast. Pain shot through his ribs, and he nearly collapsed. She was beside him in a moment, steadying him with surprising strength. Careful, she said softly. For a moment, their eyes met again. The silence stretched, charged with unspoken things neither understood. Eli thought of the night before. Her whisper, her touch, and shame burned hot in his chest. I misread you, he muttered, voice low. Last night, when you said, she cut him off sharply. You were half dead and bleeding. Don't think on it. Her cheeks flushed slightly, and she turned away, gripping the back of the chair. Only men don't stop breathing. He gave a faint, embarrassed laugh, then winced from the pain. Reckon I owe you my life, then? You owe me nothing, she said quickly, but her voice trembled just enough to betray her. The rest of the day passed in heavy silence. Eli tried to help, mending a broken chair and patching a crack near the window. Clara fetched water, chopped wood, fed the chickens. They moved around each other like ghosts, sharing the same space, aware, cautious, uncertain. By evening, the clouds had cleared, and the horizon burned gold and red. Eli stepped outside, leaning against the porch post. The air smelled of rain and pine. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes called. He felt eyes on him. Not Clara's, something else. The hair on the back of his neck rose. He scanned the tree line. Nothing moved, but he could feel it, someone watching. When he turned back, Clara stood at the doorway, holding the rifle. You saw it too, she said quietly. He nodded. Tracks you saw this morning, they'll be back. Her grip tightened on the rifle. Then we'd best be ready. As night fell over the valley again, the cabin's small fire became a beacon once more, drawing attention from the far ridges. And in the shadows beyond the pines, unseen by either of them, a tall figure on horseback watched. Not one of the bandits, but another, an Apache scout, face painted with earth and ash. His name was Tsia. He had followed the trail of blood, curious about the white man who'd stumbled into sacred hunting ground. He watched the cabin light flicker through the trees, expression unreadable. The land whispered in the night wind, carrying the faint echo of the woman's voice. Don't stop. He narrowed his eyes, turned his horse, and disappeared into the darkness. The story had just begun. The night came crawling fast and heavy. Thunder rolled low across the plains, and rain fell in sharp, cold sheets that hissed against the dry earth. The little cabin stood in the middle of it all like a flickering lantern in a sea of black. Inside, Eli paced the wooden floor, jaw tight, his hand pressed against his bandaged arm. The storm outside echoed the turmoil inside his chest. Rage, guilt, and a gnawing fear that maybe this night would be his last. Sia stood near the window, silent as a shadow. His eyes glowed faintly in the lightning flashes. They come, he said finally, voice low. 6 riders. Maybe more. They follow your tracks still. Clara froze where she stood by the hearth. Her hands trembled slightly as she reloaded the old rifle, her face pale but resolute. She had seen too much death in her time to scream now. Eli nodded grimly. They won't quit. Not until they finish what they started. A gust of wind rattled the shutters. Sia reached for his bow, fingers brushing the carved wood. Then we make stand here. Eli's eyes swept the cabin. One door, one small window, and nowhere to run. He moved to the table, sliding a lantern toward the center and checking his gun. Clara, if they break through, you run to the back creek. It leads through the ravine. Her eyes flashed. And leave you two to die? Not a chance. Lightning split the sky. For a moment, Eli saw her face in the stark white glow. Fear mixed with something stronger, something fierce. He opened his mouth to argue, but there wasn't time. The first gunshot cracked the night. Glass shattered. The lamp flickered. Eli dropped to a crouch and fired back through the window. Sia moved beside him, quick and silent, An arrow loosed into the dark. A scream followed. "Two down," Sia muttered. "More coming." Eli reloaded. "We hold until dawn." Clara ducked as bullets ripped through the walls. She pressed herself behind the stove, whispering a prayer under her breath. Smoke from the rifle drifted through the room, mixing with the damp smell of rain and gunpowder. Another rider charged from the darkness, firing wildly. Eli spun, shot once. The man fell face first into the mud. Thunder rolled again, shaking the earth. Sia darted out through the side door, disappearing into the rain. A moment later, two distant gunshots echoed, followed by silence. When he returned, blood streaked his sleeve, but his eyes were calm. "Half gone," he said. Eli's arm throbbed. "And the other half?" Sia glanced toward the horizon. "They wait for dawn. They think fear will do their work." Eli leaned against the table, breathing hard. "Then they don't know me." Hours passed. The storm never let up. Inside, the three of them waited, tense, exhausted, and silent except for the wind. The walls groaned under the weight of rain. Clara finally spoke, voice trembling just a little. "Eli, if we don't make it." He cut her off. "We will." She swallowed hard, staring into the fire. "You've carried something heavy a long time. You should lay it down before the end." He met her gaze. Lightning flashed again. "Maybe I already have." A shadow moved outside. Eli's instinct screamed. He grabbed his rifle just as the door splintered open. Men poured in, muddy, shouting, gunfire lighting the room. The cabin erupted into chaos. Eli fired point blank, with chips flying. Sia lunged forward, knife flashing, striking one man down before another tackled him to the floor. Clara screamed, grabbed the iron poker, and swung it with desperate strength. The man staggered back. Eli's bullet finished him. The fight blurred into smoke and thunder. Eli's shoulder caught a bullet. He barely felt it through the adrenaline. He reloaded, fired again. Sia moved beside him, his bow snapping, each arrow finding its mark. When the last man fell, silence descended again, broken only by rain drumming against the roof. The air stank of smoke, iron, and death. Eli stood swaying, rifle still raised. Clara rushed him. "You're bleeding again. Sit down before you fall." He looked at Sia first. The warrior leaned against the wall, hand pressed to his ribs. Blood seeped fast between his fingers. "Damn it," Eli whispered, kneeling beside him. "You're hit bad." Sia smiled faintly. "Not first time. Won't be last." Clara tore a strip from her skirt, pressing it against his wound. "Don't talk. Save your strength." But Sia shook his head. "Storm's over." His breathing slowed. The firelight flickered across his face, calm, resolute. "Eli, you remember what I say before? Every storm ends. You must not stop, even when the thunder fades." Eli gripped his shoulder, words caught in his throat. "You're not dying tonight, damn it." Sia's lips twitched. "We all die, but not all live." The rain softened, pattering like a whisper on the roof. Sia's head fell back, his eyes closing, his chest rising one last time before going still. Clara bowed her head, tears falling silently. Eli sat motionless beside his fallen friend, jaw trembling. The fire crackled. The storm passed. The night finally went still. Outside, the dawn began to break, a faint orange glow rising over the hills. Eli rose slowly, staring at the horizon. His hands were stained red, his body shaking, but something inside him had changed. He turned to Clara. "Help me carry him," he said quietly. Together they lifted Sia's body and stepped into the rain-washed dawn, the sky streaked with light. Behind them, smoke curled from the broken cabin, curling upward like a soul leaving its shell. The storm had passed, but the echoes would never fade. The sun rose cold and gold over the valley, its light stretching across a landscape washed clean by rain. Smoke still drifted from what was left of the cabin, half-burned walls, a collapsed roof, and scattered tools that glinted wet in the morning light. Eli stood on the hill above it all, hat in his hand, the wind tugging at his coat. The earth at his feet was freshly turned, Sia's grave marked with a carved stone and a bough laid gently beside it. Clara knelt beside the mound, her hands clasped, her lips moving in quiet prayer. Eli's gaze drifted to the horizon. For the first time in years, it didn't look endless. It looked alive. The weight that had driven him to run from town to town, from fight to fight, seemed to fade with each passing minute. He spoke softly, mostly to himself. "You were right, old friend. Some storms ain't meant to kill, just to clear the sky." The wind whispered through the tall grass, as if answering him. Clara stood and looked at him, her eyes rimmed with red but steady. "He saved us both," she said. Eli nodded. "He did more than that. He reminded me what it means to stand for something again." They walked back down toward the cabin, their boots sinking into the wet soil. Clara stopped once, glancing over her shoulder at the grave. "I used to think this land was cursed," she said. "My husband died here, and every time I looked at that hill I saw loss. But now," her voice trailed off. Eli looked at her quietly. Now it feels like it remembers," she said softly. "Like it's alive again." They reached the cabin, and Eli began clearing what remained: shattered glass, broken chairs, charred boards. Clara joined him, sleeves rolled up, her hair tied back. Neither spoke for a long while, but the silence between them felt gentle, not empty. Days passed. They rebuilt slowly. Each morning, Eli rose before dawn, repaired fences, cut new lumber, and patched the roof. Clara tended to the animals that had survived the fire. Some nights they shared stories by lamplight, about the past, about the people they'd lost. The laughter came quiet at first, awkward, but it came all the same. By the third week, the cabin was standing again, rough but sturdy. The smell of new pine filled the air. The hills bloomed green after the rain, and the creek that had nearly drowned them once now sang softly through the ravine. Eli sometimes found himself standing on the porch at sunset, watching the horizon the way Tia used to. He'd light his pipe, take a slow breath, and listen to the wind, to the silence, to the heartbeat of a land that had once been nothing but pain. One evening, Clara joined him there. She leaned on the railing, her hands smudged with dirt from the day's work. "You ever think of leaving?" she asked after a long pause. Eli tilted his head. "Used to. Couldn't stay in one place for long, without ghosts catching up. And now," he smiled faintly, "now I reckon the ghosts found their rest." She looked at him with a quiet kind of warmth, the kind that didn't need words. "You've changed, Eli." He chuckled low. "Or maybe I just stopped running long enough to notice." A breeze rustled the grass below. The lights softened over the hills. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, its cry echoing over the open land. Clara hesitated, then said, "That night, when I said don't stop, I wasn't just scared." Eli turned to her, his brow furrowed. "I meant it," she continued softly. "Don't stop fighting for something better. Don't stop believing there's good left, even after everything." Eli's throat tightened. He looked away, toward Sia's hill. "I thought I understood then. I didn't. Not until now." She smiled, eyes glistening in the firelight spilling through the window. "Then maybe you do now." They stood there as the sky darkened, both lost in thought. Finally, Eli spoke again. "You think he'd approve of what we've done here?" Clara followed his gaze to the hill. "I think he already does." The wind carried the faint scent of sage and rain. The world felt whole again, even if it still carried its scars. As night settled, the two of them moved inside. The new roof creaked gently, and the fire burned warm in the hearth. Eli sat at the table, running his fingers over a small wooden carving Tia had left behind, a hawk in flight. Clara poured coffee, setting a cup in front of him. "You gonna keep wandering?" she asked. He looked up, smiling tiredly. "This time, I think I'll stay." Outside, the land stretched far and open, the stars bright and endless. Weeks turned to months. The cabin became more than shelter, it became home. The grass grew tall again where the fire had burned, and flowers began to bloom near Sia's resting place. Travelers passing through spoke of a man and woman who offered food and shelter to strangers, a quiet rancher and a widow who never turned anyone away. Eli didn't speak much of the past anymore, but sometimes at sunset, Clara would catch him staring toward the ridge, as if listening for something only he could hear. One night, as the wind brushed gently through the cabin's open window, Clara's voice came soft through the dark. Eli. He looked up from where he sat sharpening his knife. She smiled faintly. Storm's over. He set the knife down, watching the way the lamplight danced in her eyes. Yeah, he said. Guess it is. For a long moment, they just listened, to the fire crackling, to the wind whispering through the grass outside. And then she said it again, the same words that had started it all. But this time, they were filled with peace instead of fear. Don't stop. He smiled, the corners of his eyes softening. Not anymore. The camera would pull back slowly, drifting up over the cabin, past the glowing windows and into the starlit sky. The wind hums low through the prairie grass, carrying Tsia's last words like a promise. Don't stop living. The plains stretch endless below, a sea of light and shadow, alive with the quiet hum of rebirth. Then the narrator's voice fades in, deep and resonant. Some storms break a man. Others forge him anew. Eli McGraw found peace not in the end of pain, but in the courage to begin again. Out here, where the wind remembers every cry and the land holds every ghost, even the smallest whisper can change everything. The screen fades to black, leaving only the echo of the wind and the faint strum of a guitar. Golden text appears across the darkness. Don't stop. A story of redemption in the Wild West. Then the narrator's closing words. If this story touched your heart, don't stop here. Like, share, and subscribe to keep the spirit of the old frontier alive. Every whisper carries a story, and some storms are worth remembering. The guitar fades. The screen darkens fully. Silence returns, except for the endless wind of the West.